There are teams that you just want to give your right foot or your right arm or whatever the saying goes to yell at and say they're not so smart, they're not so great, and all that. Different fan bases have different teams to hate on. I mean, when you look at the Battle of Alberta with Edmonton and Calgary, Edmonton fans hate Calgary, Calgary fans hate Edmonton. It's the same with the Leafs and Senators. The Leafs don't like Ottawa, and Sens fans don't like the Leafs. It's like Montreal and Boston. They hate each other and all that. But one city that's universally hated by most NHL fans is the city of Philadelphia. Philadelphia seems to be a good city and all that. City of brotherly love, where Rocky ran up the steps of the art museum, and they are the home to the current Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. But the fact of the matter is, their hockey team is hated. Sometimes because of their goonery of the 70s, but the fact of the matter is that the Flyers have historically been terrible with getting to a Stanley Cup final and losing the Stanley Cup finals. But anyway, we're going to talk about the Flyers and one of the most egregious misses by a Flyer team, the 1996 Philadelphia Flyers. Hello out there, we're on the air. It's Cutter with NHL time. Tensions blow, the whistle blown, and the pucks go down the ice. Some teams just want to win the cup and do it with a smile. Hey, that is cool. Up on the River Nile. Oh, the good old hockey game. Who will come out on top? Will a team get through the cup by any means necessary? Oh, the good old hockey game. It's the best game you can name. And I'm have no shame. I will simulate those hockey games. Woo! So anyway, the 96 Flyers. This was their 29th season in the NHL. The final year at the Spectrum, they would move to the Core State Center, now called the Wachovia Center. I think that's what they call it now. Nevertheless, the Flyers were Atlantic Division champs and were the top team in the Eastern Conference. So it looked pretty good for them. So the Flyers routed Montreal 7-1, which brought Montreal to the start of their ineptness and made Jacques Demers be fired for Mario Tremblay. Of course, he ran wild out of town. They were 5-0-1 at one point. Lindros got hurt and the team limped. But after his return, they put him in great work and all that. They put up 13 wins in their last 16 games, and thanks to Dale Hawerchuk's acquisition, they look pretty good. So, anyway, that was huge and all that. They actually had a torch passing ceremony at the end of their game against Montreal from Bobby Clarke to Lindros. They were copying Montreal. Flyers put up 103 points, narrowly beating their in-state rivals Pittsburgh, who had 102. Even though Pittsburgh had more wins, Flyers had more ties. So then that means they got to face the Tampa Bay Lightning, who were making their first NHL playoff appearance. Philly looked good in game one, but then Brian Bradley, Kitchener, scored in overtime to make it a 1-1 series. And then game three, Alexander Salvanov, out of freaking nowhere, scored in the Thunderdome, and Tampa was up 2-1. The Flyers would win 3 straight games. And then they would take on the Panthers, who needed John Van Beesbroek in the trap for success. Florida won game one, and the Flyers did win game 2 and 3. Unfortunately, though, a pair of overtime losses sunk the Flyers, if you will. It's kind of ironic because of the 5 losses the Flyers suffered, sorry, 6 losses, excuse me, 4 of them were in overtime. So the Flyers really did not like going to overtime. They didn't even win an overtime game. You see the highlights and you see the players, Hoffman, Burroughs, and Denis. Goaltending, Hextall, 31, 13, and 7. Garceau would be the backup. Russo will leave the team. But yeah, Hextall was 6 and 6. He was the goalie. Leclerc and Lindros were on the second All-Star team. Craig McTavish was selected by the commissioner. Some team stuff, records. Yeah, there are 4 overtime losses during the 1996 Stanley Cup Finals. Playoffs is tied for the NHL league. Yeah, lose 4 times. I just want to see some. Yeah. Many teams were 4. There were how many teams? 18. 18 teams have lost 4 times in overtime. But the Flyers have played the third fewest of the games. Montreal, the 1951 Habs lost 4 times in the finals in 11 games because in 1951 there was only 2 rounds of the playoffs. And yeah, all 4 of their overtime losses was to the Leafs because every game in that 1951 Stanley Cup final went to overtime. In 1991, the Kings lost 4 times in overtime. They fell to the Oilers in the second round. I think Vancouver nipped them once and Edmonton nipped LA 3 times in round 2. Yeah, and their Flyers 4 times in 12 games. The Capitals are also the only team who have been to only 2 rounds of the Stanley Cup playoffs, only to lose 4 times in overtime. In 2012, they got bit 4 times in overtime. Even though they did win a critical game 7 in overtime on Joe Ward's goal to get to the second round against the Rangers, they got bit twice. So it's funny, but that's how it goes. I didn't even know that. Anyway, the Flyers got the rights to Garth Snow from the Nordique/Avalanche franchise. They managed to get a first and second round pick for Dmitry Yushkevich. The Leafs needed Yushkevich. It worked. San Jose traded Pat Falloon, their first ever draft pick, to the Flyers in exchange for a first round pick in '96. Trent Clyde went to Philly for Brett Fedek. Kevin Dineen went to Hartford, and he was the last captain of Hartford. Future considerations. Russo was traded to Philly for Tim Shovelday, who didn't play with the Flyers, I don't think. The Flyers traded Craig McTavish, the last player to not wear a helmet in a NHL game, to St. Louis for Dale Hawerchuk. It worked out. Mac was a good player for the Blues in that playoff run. Hawerchuk worked out for Philly. And John Druce came from LA to Philly. He picked up Sean Semis in 2-year free agency. They lost him in free agency once. They picked him up this time. Dave Brown went to San Jose. Gilbert Dion was bought out. They signed LeClaire and Desjardins to major deals. At the '95 NHL draft, they drafted future goalie Brian Boucher, 22nd overall from the WHL. All that. So it worked out quite well. But yeah, let's talk about the '96 Flyers. How would they have done in the conference finals? Anyway, so we got Pittsburgh and Philadelphia going toe to toe. The '96 Flyers, yeah, they had fewer wins, but they had 9 more points through ties than Pittsburgh. So that meant that Philly was the better team in the East. Yeah, and of course we leave everything else alone. So we have Penguins Flyers. Man, the Battle of Pennsylvania for a trip to the final against Colorado. Playoff game 1 sees the Penguins go into Philly and beat the tar out of them 7-3. Francis and a reinvigorated Mario Lemieux scored. Then Lindros made it 2-1, but Yager and Lemieux put Hextall out of the net and Garth Snow into the net. It was 7-2 by the second period. Chris Reels and Chris Wells only played a minute plus. Philly only had time for Joe Otto and Phil Crow, 39 seconds. Chris Terry in minute 16. So Hextall shit the bed. Snow came in. Lemieux, Francis, and Yager were the 3 stars. Game 2 sees the Penguins lose 5-1, so it's a 1-1 split. Lindros, Pat Falloon, and Haller with the goals. Make it 3-0. John Druce made it 4-0. the guy with the playoff goal stuff from Washington in the 1990 playoffs, if you must know. And then Marty Lemieux scored. Then John Drews scored to make it 5-1. John Drews, of all people. Lindros was ejected for elbowing. Dano Smolenski only made 54 for Pittsburgh. Philly, Crow, and Otto, 253 each. Doesn't matter now. Sabota, Drews, and Holler, your 3 stars. Yeah, weird. John Drews, the 2nd star. I would have guessed. Game 3 sees the Penguins win 4-3. Francis and Yager in the first period for Pittsburgh. Leclaire for Philly. Nedved made it 3-1. Penguins. Brind'Amour made it 3-2. Then Yager and Lindros swapped goals. And that's all. Joe Otto. There, JJ and Smolenski. So Barrasso, Yager, and Zubov were the heroes. Game 4 saw the Flyers win 5-1. Lindros did score to make it 1-0. Then Desjardins, Brind'Amour, and Leclaire made it 4-0 before long. Brad Lauer scored on a penalty shot. And then John Leclaire made it 5-1. So Johnny Leclaire. 5-4-6. Historian 2 minutes. Brian Smolenski 2 minutes. 2 minutes. We're looking so good. Hextall and Barrasso. Hextall the first star. Lindros and Sabota the other stars. So at 2-2. The Flyers go back home with a 3-2 series lead, winning, 3-2. Lemieux scored, then Brind'Amour and Desjardins for Philly. Peter Nedved tied it at 2, and then with 3 minutes, Leclaire made it 3-2. Chris Joseph only by 20 seconds. Muskie 218. Hextall, Barrasso, and Lindros. So it was a goalie duel. Will Philly go up 3 games? Will Philly win? Answer is yes, they do. Philly does win the game 4-2 in Game 6. So Pittsburgh gets eliminated, and the Flyers go to the Stanley Cup Final. Peter Nedved scored with 2 Flyers in the box. Desjardins and Lindros, the 2 Erics. Leclaire made it 1-1. Lemieux made it 2-1, and Brind'Amour made it 2-2. But in the third period, Leclaire scored, and then Pat Falloon into the empty net. Pat Falloon's going to the finals. I just didn't think that was coming. Leclaire, Lindros, and Brind'Amour. John Leclaire. So anyway, the Flyers would have to head to Colorado. Colorado won the Western Conference. We leave that alone. Leave me alone. So, yeah, Colorado won by a point over Philly, so they would win the first game. Right. Well, the Flyers went into Colorado, won 3-1. FedEx made it 1-0. Kamensky tied it at 1. But Leclaire and even Shanatowski got into that 3-1. Anyway, 3-1. Mike Keane only played 17 seconds. Mike fucking Keane. Michael 134. Hey, James. Hey, Patrick. Anyway, Hextall, Desjardins, and Lindros. Hey, Mike. Game 2. Game 2 saw the Flyers beat Colorado 4-3. As the Flyers now went into Colorado and won 2 straight games. Lindros and Leclaire made it 2-0 Flyers. Forsberg made it 2-1. Power play goal by Renberg 3-1. Scott Young made it 3-2. Sakic made it 3-3. But John Leclaire scored on his former Habs teammate. Look it up, people. Lindros, Leclaire, and Renberg the stars. Patrick Roy is in trouble. Game 3 in Philly saw Colorado come roaring back 7-2 to at least make it a 5th game. So Kamensky made it 1-0. Leclaire tied it at 1. Foote made it 2-1. Forsberg made it 3-1, the former Flyer. Dropback. Kovalenko 4-1. Lindros made it 4-2. Yeah, because Quebec. Colorado Philly, the narrative was, of course, the Lindros trade. What happened later? Like, Forsberg was tearing it up in Colorado. and Lindros was turning up in Philly. Peter Forsberg made it 5-2. Hextall was replaced by Snow, but Kamensky and Lemieux made it 2 goals. And the Avalanche, shocked because Garceau used to play for them. Mike Keane only played 2 fucking seconds. Why would you allow that to happen? Anyway, yeah, Chris Terran played a minute 10. Sakic, Forsberg, Kamensky. The 3 stars is Hextall is human. Only human. Game 4 sees Colorado win 7-4 to force at least a game 6. And every road team has won. Sakic scored and Young scored 2-0. Flyers lost Antosky for charging. Sakic made it 3-0 and then Otto made it 3-1. Sakic scored a hat trick. Forsberg scored. Hextall was replaced. Leclaire made it 5-2 by Kamensky and Sakic. Got on that too. So Snow couldn't do anything. Sakic, Ozolich, call Lemieux. Game 5 in Colorado. And the narrative was not there as the Flyers thought, okay, we will win Game 5 in Colorado. Not so fast. Philly loses 5-2. Kovalenko made it 1-0. Lindros made it 1-1. Kovalenko, Forsberg, and Kamensky made it 4-1. Lindros made it 4-2. Kamensky scores, and then they decided enough was enough and put Hextall out of the game. Phil Crow. Why? 2 goals on 27 shots. Hextall sucked 48 minutes. Forsberg, Kamensky, and Foot. Anyway, game 6 sees the Flyers lose 4-3 as the Avalanche do win the Stanley Cup in 6 games. The Flyers had a 2-0 series lead, and they blew it. As Sakic scored, then Leclaire won 1. Leclaire made it 2-1 Flyers. Kovalenko scored on the power play 2-2. Falou made it 3-2. And then Denmarsh and Forsberg, within 20 seconds of each other, scored goals. Colorado wins. And the Flyers fall in 6 games, and they would not have won the Stanley Cup. And Colorado would have been laughing at Philly because Forsberg was better than Lindros, apparently. And they had Kerry Huffman. So anyway, Forsberg, Leclaire, Sakic. So yeah, Forsberg would have got revenge on the team that dumped him off so fast. That's what happens. But anyway, the Flyers faltered in 6. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. I do